On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Mitch Trale. He's the head of infrastructure at HackerOne. We're going to be talking about a few topics. We're going to meander potentially in our next 20, 25 minutes here with Mitch, but we're going to be talking about the impacts and challenges around distributed teams, how Mitch is kind of dealing with culture, bringing successes to the forefront. And obviously infrastructure is a core component to every company, but sometimes it's invisible. And we're going to talk about how he helps kind of celebrate his team and, the shift left of infrastructure, amongst other things. Hopefully we get to all this stuff. If not, we'll have to ask him back. But Mitch, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for the invite, Amir. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So to set context, not everyone might be familiar with what HackerOne does. Obviously, you're the head of infrastructure there. So maybe tell us what HackerOne does and just what your responsibilities are, and we'll dive in.
Sure. So HackerOne is the world's leading crowdsourced security platform. We run bug bounties and vulnerability disclosure programs for enterprise customers, financial organizations, crypto exchanges, even federal and state governments here in the United States. The company was founded in the Netherlands, in Groningen, and we have offices in San Francisco and New York, around the world. So we have a digital first sort of distributed company culture and a strong set of values that informs that. And we're building some exciting things in 2021.
Awesome. I guess just to start off, you mentioned, you guys are distributed, as a company, you have multiple, locations that you're based out of. What was your organization like before everyone had to be fully distributed? Were you guys all remote, or were you guys actually going into an office?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I joined the company last February, we were distributed on the infrastructure squad, particularly. We had product development teams in San Francisco and the Netherlands, and a few engineers and product folks around the States here. But after I joined, I flew out to meet half the team in Europe, and then flew home. And the day after I got back, they locked everything down. So we sort of immediately shifted as an entire company to this digital first model and had to, I think, learn some processes. But we've been in a hybrid mode up to that time, again, with even parts of the sales org. And our CEO, Martin Mikos, ran MySQL for years, and as a CEO there had a sort of hybrid model as well. So I think there was a lot of experience on the leadership side at HackerOne for making this transition smooth.
Interesting. So they had a baseline, but obviously, and I guess some people on your team were already distributed, but now going full distributed. You joined at an interesting time, it seems, because the day after you guys are locked down. I guess when you look back at your experience, did your ramping up get affected? I'm just curious if it affected you ramping up or just building relationships, maybe at other orgs, you had more face time. Was that a shift or a change for you?
In some ways, absolutely. I mean, I think I seek connectivity, meeting with folks, and that communication face to face has traditionally been important. I've worked in smaller organizations, startups, where being co-located was a part of the deal. But I think too that there's a certain leveling of the playing field that happens when we choose to meet online first, right? When we start to interview new folks and bring folks into the company and interact with folks day to day in a distributed way, I think that creates a kind of commons, which is really powerful. And in fact, I found that for folks who were distributed at HackerOne before the rest of the company went distributed, their experience improved dramatically because now you had people coming together, sharing information in sort of Zoom first, asynchronous document writing first. And so those kinds of processes were things that we focused on and really improved throughout last year as we sort of transition into this mode.
It's interesting. That kind of echoes what I have been hearing from candidates the last decade. Prior to last year, the number one question was, all right, they'll let me work remote, but are they comfortable with that? Do they understand how remote people work? Or am I the only one? I don't want that because I'm just going to be an afterthought. How are they going to evaluate me? There's a host of questions that people had. Now, I think what you're describing is that leveling of playing field. There's now processes to be the majority and evaluate people, the performance reviews, everything that goes into a traditional, employee experience has to now be distributed.
I think that's right. It puts stress on different parts of sort of a company's operation, right? I think information dissemination is huge. Everybody wants to know what's going on and sort of deserves to know as much as possible. In fact, one of the core values of HackerOne is a default to disclosure. So we share information with each other unless there's a really great reason not to. And so how do we make sure that everybody has not only the information they need in order to do their jobs, but also context and business impact of engineering decisions that we're making, the value that we're generating. I think all of that's really important to sort of talk about and share. And one of the challenges we saw along the way too was trying to understand sort of where decisions are being made. And I think if you're in a sort of Zoom first world where you're not sure you're in all the right meetings, or you're not sure exactly what's being said in various rooms, you start to feel a bit distanced, or like you don't really know what's going on. And so something that I think we're working towards with these sort of asynchronous communication and information sharing models is thinking about actually something Darren Murph from GitLab spoke about. He's the head of remote there. Is sort of meetings are about respecting people's time, and it's really hard to get to consensus and make a strong decision in a single meeting. And so it's important to encode what's happening in a meeting, but then to share that out broadly so that people can engage with it both before and after. So that means coming with a strong agenda, coming with a proposal, and having outputs from that meeting that get spread to the edge so that people have the tools and the knowledge they need to make decisions. Because the truth is, I think we want most decision-making to happen at the edge. And I mean by individual engineers, individual sales folks across the organization. The more information we have, the better choices we're going to make. And I think the more engaged we're going to feel with the sort of mission of the company.
Interesting. And I actually agree with you, because I think I had a debate long ago about email silo and how much decision making happens in email, and how does that get out, and how does it get presented out once decisions have been made. And I don't know if anyone's really. I mean, Slack is obviously people want to use Slack to kind of foster more open communication, but now with everyone on Zoom and recording Zoom, I mean, people can kind of hear for themselves potentially if everyone's recording and sharing those recordings.
I think so. Yeah. And email and sort of meetings are always going to be a bit exclusive. You can't really have everybody there, although we do have a weekly AMA where every HackerOne is on the call and gets to sort of talk and ask anyone anything. And that's a great opportunity, a forum for digging into these questions. But Slack as a commons is fantastic. I think that really is where a lot of work is happening. But of course, we lose the thread, we lose context there. So how do we take information out of Slack and put it in somewhere more durable, whether that's wiki or a Git issue or something that we can reference back to, I think is really key. And just again, getting smart about our documentation and processes, right? So that these things are repeatable actions. And I think that's part of the engineering culture, right? I feel like culture is what you do. It's the things that you make sort of repeatable rituals. And you got to reinforce this over time, because otherwise those actions will sort of fade.
Absolutely. And I know, we were talking about, infrastructure. Obviously, you guys you mentioned already sometimes invisible, not always at the forefront, being distributed now. How do you deal with that? Like, obviously, you're in charge of your team, but obviously, you want to bring, you want to celebrate wins. I guess there's two questions in there. One is, how do you deal with just, bringing attention to your team and celebrating wins? I guess that's a good starting point.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, we're relatively small. I'd say we punch above our weight at HackerOne in almost every respect here. And the infrastructure squad is 5 folks. And I'm the engineering manager for it. So, these are humble people on infra. These are incredibly competent, skillful people who are essentially putting on a utility, right? It's like electricity or water. You notice it when it doesn't turn on, but in most cases, we're operating behind the scenes and sort of catching a lot of balls as they sort of fall. And so I think one of my roles as a leader in this team is to tell the story, sort of be a bard for the successes, sing the song of infra, and communicate that value to the rest of the company, and also be a sort of cross-collaborative stakeholder. Be someone who can go talk to compliance, talk to security, be a bridge between various departments, and take on these sort of responsibilities that I think are going to just sort of raise the brand of infra within the organization.
And I guess when you're looking at, some of the challenges, and again, you can maybe contrast this to previous jobs, but when you're actually looking at and I actually had a podcast about this, and it's just, I guess, fresh in my mind, it just popped in, is, actually performance reviews and how you're collecting the data points that might be different than previous. What has changed for you?
One thing that's changed is sort of the company-wide approach to this. And then there's also individual, engineering department approach to this and an individual squad approach. So within that, I think we got to find what works, what feels right, what's generating value. Right? So we have guidance at a high level for sort of company evaluations, 360s, annual reviews. Then we also have set of sort of quarterly check-ins within the engineering org. What's working? What are some focus areas? What can we improve? And then even at the individual squad level, we have sort of long-running documentation about what we want to work on, goal setting, and just sort of temperature checking, right? Whether it's weekly check-ins, and even the social meetings have been incredibly valuable, just getting together. Because one of the challenges with our squad is really time zones. It's one thing to be distributed and to share work in a similar sort of geographic region, but because we only have 3 or 4 hours of overlap in the morning with our European colleagues, we have to make that time count for both cultural connectivity and performance conversations, tactical conversations. So all of that needs to have a home there. So I mean, certainly it's challenging in a different way, but I think that we're here to sort of support each other, coach each other. The mentorship is key. And again, I see my role as a coach, and as actually my spouse is a high school English teacher. She talks about this mentality of being the guide at the side, right? Someone who's in there working with everybody, sort of taking problems on as their own, versus the sage on the stage who sort of stands up and sends this message out and down. I really see this as almost a flattened hierarchy model where we're all in the trenches together.
Awesome. I like that. Being the guide at the side, I'm going to remember that. I might use that now. So thank your wife for me. So, I mean, it's an interesting problem because obviously you guys have just a couple of hours. You guys have to coordinate. You guys have to have some type of maybe interactivity that is social, to kind of, keep your team humming. How do you manage that? Because obviously within those 3-4 hours of overlap, you want to, maximize value and making sure that you guys are most productive, but also you have other things you need to probably have happen.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that means things like, working with AWS on a sort of enterprise support cadence call at an early hour. It means waking up and 5 a.m. to play Among Us sometimes with engineers in the Netherlands. I mean, I think it means availability. I feel like LeBron James probably said leadership is about availability, about being there. So I see certainly my role as an engineering leader is sort of needing to show up and create space for that connectivity. So again, it's the infra-social hours or coffee hours. It's certain planning meetings and rituals, but we try to move a lot of those functional meetings into Slack, into Git, into other sort of asynchronous forms, so that we can really focus on creating that sort of team culture, that team dynamic, strengthening those bonds individually. Every team member has one-on-ones with every other team member within Infra, and I think that's a common cultural aspect around the other parts of the engineering organization. So, I mean, it takes work and a lot of scheduling, but I think we've adapted, and it's been something that's worked for 8 years now at HackerOne.
Very interesting. I like that because I think a manager who's getting up at 5 a.m. to engage in a social activity it would win me over. That would mean a ton to me because you could ask me to, on the flip side, adjust my schedule and stay up at, whatever it be, 1 a.m. or midnight and say, hey, you adjust, but the manager adjusting, and leadership is about availability. I really like that. That's a solid way of viewing it.
I mean, I agree. I think it's critical just to sort of, again, meet people where they are and to recognize that at different times we're going to be called upon to do more. I think culturally at HackerOne, there was an era where the European folks were actually online much later in the evening. There was an expectation that they'd be on at 8 or 9 p.m. for certain meetings so that the San Francisco office could sort of have a more, comfortable sort of mode or scheduling. But I think that shifts over time and really has to be adaptive. And we also now, I think in 2021, it's a perfect opportunity for us all to be jealous with our time, respectful of each other, look at those recurring meetings on your calendar, ask yourself, is this valuable? Is this essential? Can we change this, make this more useful? And then again, keep the things that are working, keep the things that are keeping you close. Because, without that, I just think you sort of get this estrangement. You start to feel like the drift of not sort of interacting with your colleagues. And I think you can work on that on the engineering side with pair programming sessions. You can come up with a sort of engineering-wide opportunities. Certainly we have a monthly all hands where we all get to make technical presentations and sort of understand how things are going, temperature check. But it's just, you got to be intentional about it. It won't happen accidentally. We just ran a health check on the Infra Squad earlier this week. It's sort of loosely modeled after Spotify's health check style. And so it's just, again, a temperature test to see, hey, how are we doing on efficiency? Are we having fun, right? How easy is it to release? How's our performance? How's our availability? And I think if you just ask yourself these questions, you're already on the path to sort of iteratively improving your outcomes. And just, again, it's metrics driven. And we can see the trends over the last couple of years. So it's great to see these things improve.
And you just kind of sparked the flip opposite view of this, and I hadn't really thought about it. I don't know why until now, but previously, and when we're all in the office, if somebody was unhappy or it looked like they might be looking to leave, I mean, they do what they can to avoid that being known. But obviously, if somebody's taking 3 doctor's appointments in a week, you start kind of going, all right, well, okay, well, is there anything medically you need help with? But now with people working remote, people can interview as much as they want, literally. I mean, you would never know because they're home as long as they're doing their work. And I don't know how people are grappling with that yet, but I was just curious, have you had any thoughts around that? Or is that just, hey, that's going to happen now because everyone's working from home and it is what it is?
Yeah, I think that is a risk. I think that any working relationship is about trust and sort of investment in each other. I want to be in a position as a as a leader where folks can come to me with those kinds of concerns before that becomes sort of a tactical, practical part of their career search. And just to see, there's often so many opportunities within an organization to do more, do something different so we can work on those specific issues if we understand them. And again, that's open communication lines. It's about trust. But I mean, also the reality is 2020 was a transitional year for a lot of people. People were reevaluating some of the core aspects of how they lived and how they worked. Where do I need to be? Am I enjoying New York City or San Francisco for the cost of living? Do I still like the work that I'm doing and or would I like to sort of look elsewhere? I think we certainly saw folks really coming to HackerOne with this is a breath of fresh air. The culture that y'all have is so strong here. And we also had folks who had been at the organization for some time who made a move elsewhere. And, I think something that we talk about internally is the company is stronger than any one person. The company is durable and has a great mission that people believe in, right? And we expect things to change over time as part of the evolution. But I think so long as we're all really creating that sort of gravity, in the company and that sense of respect and mission-driven sort of, idea of why we're here, right? I think that's what matters, just keeping that sort of front and center. And for people who are really believers in that crowdsourced security model, that's a huge attractant for HackerOne, keeps people around.
Yeah, I think you guys have you just honestly, yeah, I mean, the brand's really cool because I think people who want to join probably already are well aware of what you guys are doing. And I think it's it's probably a draw. And
Wild space. I mean, this is not, I didn't have a security background coming into this. I mean, I've been on the sort of securing the web application sort of plane before. And in fact, actually worked with HackerOne in a previous organization, which is how I learned about the business. And so coming to this side of the biz has been just incredibly eye-opening and learned a lot about what enterprise customers are looking for, what small business are looking for, what individual hackers are working for. I mean, we're a marketplace. And so learning from these incredibly talented folks all around the world, and then also learning from the engineers and folks at HackerOne who have been doing this for years. It's an amazing opportunity, right? And we see this as the future of security, something that if folks don't have this, if companies don't employ hacker-powered security, crowdsourced security in the future, it'll be a sort of liability or a gap. And so we have a big role to play there and a lot of work to do to get there, but we're all really motivated about it.
Absolutely. I was going to have you, I know we're kind of talking a slightly different topic, but I was kind of curious to get your point of view. I think we kind of mentioned it in our pre-call about, obviously security has been shifting left and, DevOps is now firmly really close to the software engineering process. And depending on what you're looking at infrastructure, you're mentioning the shift left's kind of already happening. Is that kind of what you're seeing at HackerOne as well?
Yeah, we're absolutely seeing more of that happening, whether it's engagements with site-to-site tunnels where we're able to sort of get into a trusted network and probe web-connected cameras and biometric scanners or internal hardware and software. And so, and we've also had a lot of success with adapting essentially a traditional pen test model towards this sort of crowdsourced hacker-powered penetration testing. And so, a big part of one of our strategies is really kind of creating products that are grokkable to more traditional sort of enterprise customers. So, if folks have a sort of pen test budget or a certain kind of sort of security allotment here, can we sort of offer a product that meets those needs, but then also we can complement this with a sort of deeper integration, right? Whether through our VPN gateway program, we have HackerOne Clear for background check, sort of additional security levels on top of the hackers themselves. So, I think there's a ton of opportunity there as far as integrating hacker-powered security into continuous integration, into the development process, offering people threat intelligence feeds and sort of asset management technologies. And the space is booming, right? But also, the number of sort of big players, I think, is relatively small. So I think we can make a big impact there.
Awesome, man. I think sounds certainly not only is the organization really cool. I like your views on your role as a manager, and I think it's been awesome chatting about how you've been kind of grappling with this. I mean, and on top of it, you joined right at the time at the pandemic, so whoever you hired, you could definitely commiserate with them and kind of understand some of the challenges, and you could definitely probably help them through onboarding and ramping up.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that people went through a lot last year, and not just pandemic. And in America, we had an awful lot of social justice, injustice, and really thinking about the protests, thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement. I think we need to talk about these things. And in fact, HackerOne as a global company really brought those conversations into the common space. And I think listened to people who were deeply affected by this, and also sort of worked to educate, our global team and even customers about how important these issues are. So, I think it's for a lot of the leaders at HackerOne, it's really been about this sort of situational management and leadership, like meeting people where they are, finding ways to connect, on and offline if possible. I mean, I crave an opportunity to go fly to Austin, Omaha, to Amsterdam to meet the folks on the team again, just to share, beer, just to share some time. And so how do we create that sort of intimacy or that relationship remotely, I think is a challenge, but it's one I'm here for. It's one I think we're going to all need to get better at here.
Awesome, man. If somebody has any questions or they want to follow up with you on anything you mentioned, what's a good way of getting hold of you?
Sure. You can always hit me up at mitch@hackerone.com. Relatively responsive on LinkedIn if you want to try there. Certainly check out the product. We're checking it out every day. Our squad actually responds to the bug bounty on HackerOne itself. We got a program on the platform. So when folks try to hit us with a denial of service or some kind of an exploit, we're the first responders there. So by all means, invite you to hackerone.com. Let me know if you find something. And look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thanks for being on. It's been a great episode. And that's it for this podcast episode. And we'll be back again with a different guest, different topic. Until then, ask for two things. One, feedback. I mean, you guys are subscribing, which, I was saying, please subscribe. But it's kind of happening and it's kind of growing. But I really want feedback. That'd be great because I want to improve the podcast. I want to make it more valuable to everyone. Someone mentioned to me, shorten the length of the podcast. They were too long for daily. So we've gone to try to cut it down and make it more of a consumable episode. So that was a great point that somebody made. And the other is, if there's topics you want to hear about, there's other things that you want us to cover, drop me a line on LinkedIn or however way you want, Twitter. I'm everywhere. You'll just look me up and I'd love to hear from you. Until then, thanks.